nonsense. It's all going to be exposed. Here's the other point too, Glenn. There is a tendency to forget that what happens in Ukraine does not stay in Ukraine. In other words, what we're doing there is going to further sabotage and undermine any efforts that we might make under President Trump for peace in the Middle East. Now, I know that President Trump is viewed as someone who has unconditionally supported whatever Israel wants. But once he's president of the United States and finally looks clearly without interference at what American interests are, I don't think he's going to be very excited about committing the United States to a war on behalf of Israel against everyone in the Middle East, because that's what it will come down to. So again, why would you poison the waters with Russia at this late point in the war? This is not something that's good for the United States. It's not good for Trump's future administration. This is a bitter expression of anger and frustration with the simple fact that most people in the West don't want the globalist agenda. If you go back and read Solzhenitsyn, one of the most illustrative statements in his work that no one pays much attention to is, why were there gulags to begin with? Why were the Soviets compelled early on in the 1920s to set up concentration camps that ultimately held millions of people in slavery? Millions died long before there were any camps of any kind under the Nazis. Why was that necessary? It was necessary because communism didn't work. It was a failure. The only way communism could work was to put a gun to everyone's head. Well, effectively, that's what the globalists have discovered. But they haven't got the machinery that Lenin had. And so the only thing they can do is push us into a set of circumstances in which we cannot easily escape. In other words, to push us towards war and conflict in the hopes that that will rescue their aspirations. That's about all I can see. Again, this is back to the original comment. This is the antithesis of democracy. The people in the EU, the people at the top in London and Paris and Berlin and in Washington are fundamentally anti-democratic. That's the problem. They are authoritarians. They want their way or the highway, as we say in English. And they're not going to get their way. They just lost the election.
Yeah, there is something very undemocratic about this, I guess. I saw first from France, where they had Macron's party come in third, but they still demand to rule. You have in Germany, the main opposition now coming up, AfD. They're openly discussing banning the main opposition. And now, of course, in the United States, people voted overwhelmingly for Trump. People forget he also won the popular vote by about 5 million votes. So this was a huge mandate to end the proxy war, which was a key issue in his platform. And again, what do? They attempt to sabotage this 2 months before he takes over the presidency. It's difficult to explain how any of this, of course, is harmonizes with the idea of democracy.
Well, Glenn, there is another thing to consider here, and I remember this with great clarity since I lived through it in 1964, 65. Barry Goldwater was the name of the man who ran on the Republican ticket against Lyndon Johnson after President Kennedy was assassinated, and Lyndon Johnson ran for election as president. And Goldwater said, if you elect me, I will go to Vietnam. I will use whatever military force is necessary, up to and including nuclear weapons, to defeat communism in Southeast Asia. Lyndon Johnson said, that's outrageous. We will never do that. And so as soon as Lyndon Johnson gets into office, well, not as soon as, but very quickly, we discover we're on our way to Vietnam. The only difference between Johnson and Goldwater was that Goldwater wanted some sort of immediate striking victory that he thought he could achieve with a nuclear weapon if needed. And Johnson was willing to fight on the conventional level in a counterinsurgency, which had no chance of success. But the bottom line is we still got ultimately what the American people did not want. They voted for Lyndon Johnson because they didn't want to go to Vietnam. So we went to Vietnam. I see this as being very similar with certainly the Obama administration and subsequently this Biden administration. We people don't seem to understand that the things that are promised are never delivered by the left, by the globalists. In fact, what they're giving us is what we don't want. And then they're telling us that we're stupid because we vote against it. We're stupid because we don't want to go to war against Russia. We're stupid because we don't want to go to war with every Muslim country in the world on behalf of Israel. It's insane.